There's a window on the International Space Station with a chip gouged out of it. The thing that hit it was a fleck of paint. One fleck, moving so fast it struck like a bullet. Up there, even a chip of paint is a weapon. And there are millions of them. The station has had to swerve out of the way of dangerous junk 39 times. Last time, the video on GPS, I left you with a warning. Orbit is getting crowded. That was the setup. This is the problem. Because there's a way that a crowded orbit turns on itself, a chain reaction that could wall us off from space for generations. And by one measurement taken last year, it may have already started. Start with what's actually orbiting over your head right now. We actually watch by radar and telescope a little over 40,000 objects big enough to see. But what we can see is only the surface. Estimates put the real population at roughly 54,000 pieces bigger than a coffee mug, over 1 million the size of a marble, and around 140 million specks smaller than a grain of rice. And at these speeds, even that grain of rice hits like a rifle round. Almost none of it is working satellites. It's the litter of 70 years of spaceflight. Dead craft, spent rocket bodies, lens caps, frozen coolant, shrapnel. Here's the part that feels wrong. A fleck of paint shouldn't scare anyone. But nothing up there moves slowly. In low orbit, everything races at around 17,000 miles an hour, about 7.5 kilometers every second, fast enough to cross a city in the time it takes to say it. And kinetic energy follows one rule: 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. Velocity is squared, so speed matters far more than weight. Run the numbers. A 5-gram marble at that speed carries about 140,000 joules, the energy of a hand grenade going off. A 30-gram bolt, nearly 1 million joules. A highway car crash packed into a single fastener. Nothing changed but the speed. That's what turns a paint fleck into a bullet and garbage into a weapon. In 1978, a NASA scientist named Donald Kessler followed that thought to its end. Picture a crowded stadium where every collision flings more objects into the crowd. Each new object can start its own collisions. Kessler's warning was simple. Put enough stuff in orbit and one crash makes debris. And that debris causes the next crash, and each crash breeds more debris than it destroys. The collisions start feeding themselves. We named it after him, Kessler syndrome. Watch what that means. One collision doesn't make one problem. It makes a cloud, hundreds or thousands of new fragments, each on its own path, each now hunting for the next satellite. Cross a threshold and you don't need new launches to keep it going. The debris keeps the reaction alive on its own. That's the tipping point, the moment orbit starts breaking itself apart without any help from us. And this isn't a thought experiment. In 2009, a dead Russian satellite slammed into a live American one over Siberia, the first time 2 whole satellites ever collided by accident. The 2 of them shattered into roughly 2,300 trackable pieces. Most of those fragments are still up there, still crossing paths with everything else 17 years later. We've also done it deliberately, which is worse. To test anti-satellite weapons, several countries have blown up their own satellites in orbit. China did it in 2007 and created the single largest debris cloud in history. Russia did it in 2021, and that one blast is responsible for nearly half of every dodge the space station has made since. Each test was a choice to make the sky more dangerous for everyone in it. So, are we already inside the cascade? Here's the honest answer, and it has 2 halves. Last year, a study found something unsettling. At most of the altitudes we use hardest, a band from about 500 to 1,000 kilometers up, there's already enough heavy junk that the population sits past Kessler's runaway line. By that measure, the fuse is lit, and yet the sky hasn't fallen. Why not? Because Kessler syndrome is not the movie version. It isn't a wall of debris tearing the station apart in an afternoon. It's slow, a ratchet that tightens over years and decades, not minutes. It plays out differently at every altitude, and down low, the thin edge of the atmosphere still drags junk down and burns it up, quietly cleaning the lowest shelves. So we're likely in the early, creeping stage of something. Not the finale. That's not comfort. It's a warning with the timer still running, which raises the obvious question. If we can see the junk, why not just clean it up? And it turns out seeing it really is the easy part. We've gotten good at watching the sky. A global net of radar and telescopes catalogs those 40,000 objects and phones ahead a warning when 2 are about to cross. Watching isn't the wall. Doing something about it is. Here's what makes cleanup so brutally hard. A piece of space junk is non-cooperative, a dead thing. It has no handle to grab, no engine to steady it, no radio to answer you. Most of it is tumbling, rolling end over end a few degrees every second. So imagine catching a 3-ton rocket body, spinning, silent, while both of you fly at 17,000 miles an hour. You can't dock with it. There's nothing built to dock to. And now the cruel twist at the center of this whole problem. If you reach for that tumbling wreck and get it wrong, a bad grab, a clip, a bump, you don't just fail. You create a new collision, you make more debris. The one tool meant to fix the mess can feed it instead. That's what remove it safely really means here. Cleanup that goes wrong doesn't cost you a mission. It makes the cascade you're trying to stop. So how do you safely grab something that won't hold still and can't help you? People are trying everything. A robotic arm, like a tow truck with a delicate hand. That needs near-perfect eyesight and a feather touch, and so far we've only proven we can approach a dead stage, not yet capture it. A net you fire over the whole tumbling mess, forgiving of the spin but crude. A tethered harpoon that spears it. Except a harpoon can shatter off the very fragments you came to prevent. The gentler ideas run into a wall of their own. A magnetic dock can grip a satellite cleanly, but only if that satellite was built ahead of time with a plate to grab. That does nothing for the 50 years of junk already up there. And the no-contact tricks, nudging debris down with a beam of ions or a ground laser, are still mostly on paper. A laser strong enough to move junk is, from the ground, hard to tell apart from a weapon. So even our cleverest fix carries a political fuse. So where does that leave us, really? The most advanced cleanup mission yet, a Japanese craft called ADRAS-J, spent months carefully flying up to one dead rocket stage and pulling alongside it, within 15 meters. That's a real milestone. It's also so far an inspection, not a capture. The follow-up that tries to actually haul it down doesn't fly until 2027. One object, against a backlog of tens of thousands. Right now we make junk far faster than we can ever take it back, which points at the one move that actually keeps up. If we can't clean the mess fast enough, the answer is to stop making it. New rules now ask operators to pull their satellites out of orbit within 5 years of going dark, instead of leaving them up for 25. It's not glamorous, but prevention is the only tool here that scales. Every piece that never becomes debris is one nobody has to risk a mission to chase. Step back and look up from the ground for a second. Every satellite that warns you of a storm, every map on your phone, every call routed through space, all of it threads through the same few crowded shelves of orbit. Let the cascade run, and those shelves fill with a fog of debris too dense and too fast to survive. Not a wall we hit, a ceiling we quietly close over our own heads. The generation that could have reached space, kept in by the junk the last one left behind. Here's what makes this different from most doom stories. We know exactly how it works. We know how to slow it. And for the first time, we're building the machines to reach up and pull our own mess back down. The question isn't whether we understand the problem. It's whether we move faster than the timer. And here's the twist that points at where we go next. The same brutal trick, flying up to a dead, tumbling machine and taking hold of it, is the one that lets us save the living ones. Refuel them, repair them, nudge them out of harm's way. We're learning to catch our own junk. Next, we learn to fix what's still up there, before it ever becomes junk at all.